Making sure that everything is linking properly. Looks like we're ready to go. Thank you for joining me today. Let's make sure I am sharing my screen. And here we go. Welcome, welcome. Thanks for joining me as part of the NCTIES Fall Virtual Conference. I'm excited to join you this afternoon for a session called Enhancing Curriculum and Instruction, Practical Use of Digital Learning Frameworks. And if you have your chat open, you'll see that I have shared with you in the chat uh, an opportunity to grab these slides so you can take a look at them and refresh your memory and use some of these at a later date. And I particularly designed these slides so if you are an instructional coach or if you are leading some trainings with your peer group and your teachers, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can use these slides. So if you don't know me, I work with educators across North Carolina. I have had the honor of working with the Friday Institute for Educational Innovation at NC State University's College of Education for the last 15 years. My name is Jacqueline Stevens, and I am the interim director of the professional learning team at the Friday Institute. And if you are not familiar with the Friday Institute, we are a nonprofit, part of the extension and outreach for NC State University's College of Education. And we support and help in-service educators, teachers, coaches, administrators, superintendents navigate the educational waters. The training that you need, we co-develop and create with you. And we are the intersection where research, policy, and practice meet. We have an evaluation team, policy team, and we work heavily to support the needs of educators in North Carolina and beyond. So I am curious in the chat. You're here for a reason. Why'd you pick this session? And by the way, thank you very much for doing so. What kind of learning experience do you want to create for your learners? Be there them students, the adults that you support, if you're a coach. So go ahead and let me know in the chat, what kind of learning experiences do you want to create for your learners? And while you're at it, feel free to let me know where you're joining me from. So the frameworks that I have to share with you today might be familiar for some of you. And if you've heard of them before, awesome. You're my ringers in the room. If these are new for you, that's okay. I'm setting you up for success. But if this is familiar to you, I've got some new tricks and tips embedded in this session. So don't go anywhere. But let me know if you've heard of the TPAC framework. TPAC stands for Technological Pedagogical Content Knowledge Framework. This is a model that has been out for a while. This is what the model looks like. It is, I will be honest, not very popular with educators in this form. And why is that? So it's complicated. I mean, look at this. It's got a lot going on. And one of the things I love about my work is that I get to take research and models like this one and translate it for you. So it makes sense and it is helpful. Thank you, Janine. I've got a note in here that says the chat is disabled. So thank you so much for adding that information there for me. So yeah, if you want to share, if you've got any questions at all, please feel free to use that Q&A. And again, if you want access to these slides, you will find that right here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to answer Janine's question. Oops, let's see. All right, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to see if my support can't make sure that everybody gets the session slides in the chat. So like I said, not a terribly popular model in this fashion, but I get to translate this research for you. And this is what our version of the Friday Institute looks like. We've slimmed it down, we've pared it down, and our goal is to make this valuable for you in your practice. So if you want a quick review of TPAC, you can check this video out at a later date, or if you've got the slides, it's right there for you. And the idea is that these four circles combine to create what they call a sweet spot of technology integration in your lessons. So we have our content knowledge, our pedagogical knowledge, and our technology knowledge. And notice I'm saying knowledge is a really big and important word as part of this model. It's not just content, pedagogy, and technology. It's how much we know about each of these elements. And the fourth circle is context. And I'm going to get to that fourth circle in a moment. But I'm going to share with you an activity that you can duplicate with those that you support, or even just something that you can play with. And it's going to break down each of these circles. So the beauty of the TPAC model is that it is really looking at how we make decisions about how we plan our lessons. What do I want students to learn? Well, how do I want to teach it? And then is there a technology that could support and help me with it? And oh, thanks. I'm looking at the Q&A. Glad you're getting the links and the slides. So with these three pieces, we're going to get some solid instruction with technology. But this goes a little bit further. So first, I want to share with you, and again, here's that sweet spot. Sometimes we're going to land in the sweet spot. Sometimes we're not. And that is okay. The TPAC framework is going to give us permission and an realistic vocabulary for talking about why we may or may not be in that sweet spot. So you'll see here, I have this activity, and if you're looking at the slides, feel free to take this and run with it. So I have two linked graphics if you're looking at the slides, or if you have a smart device that can scan a QR code. And it's going to open up a tool called Wheel Decide. Wheel Decide is a super easy free tool that allows you to put a whole bunch of information into one of those Wheel of Fortune style circles, and you can spin the wheel and see what you land on. Now, the beauty of this is that when we're deciding what we want to teach, depending on your content area, there's lots to choose from. And you may have a scope and sequence for your curriculum that you are going to follow. But for our example here today, I have a whole bunch of different content standards thrown into a Wheel Decide. And then, because this is a collaborative activity, what you could do is have a second person open up the pedagogy spinner. And there is a list of just different pedagogical approaches. And the goal is to have each person spin and see where they land. Then they have a conversation about, does the content and the pedagogy fit? Because sometimes they'll be beautifully matched. And other times, well, we need to spin again and see what we get. And I've done the same activity with strips of paper and plastic cups. Same premise, just a different use of technology here. The goal is to have strong conversations and really talk about why this content and why this pedagogical practice. And the reason why I love giving this to you in a digital form is because you might have a few pedagogical practices that are like your favorite that you always go to. Maybe it's time to stretch a little bit and learn a few more. So there's a great list here of pedagogical practices that you can play with. So this is round one of the game. And I invite you to go ahead, you can open this up, you can spin, see what you get. And due to the nature and the logistics of our webinar here today, you can't collaborate, but I would love for you just to spin, get the idea. This is something that you can take and use with those that you support. And the beauty of the Wheel Decide tool is that you can customize this content for the conversation that you're having. You can customize the content if you're talking to your history or your math teachers. You can customize the pedagogical options based on what they are currently doing, and then maybe where you want them to grow and different things you want them to try. After this first round of spinning and having some conversation, we add in the third element of the TPAC framework, the technology knowledge part. And this we'll decide here linked to the technology spinner. This is a sampling of many, many different technology tools, and I try to update them regularly. And the goal now is with three of your colleagues. One spins the content, one spins the pedagogy, and one spins the technology. Have a conversation. Does it fit? Sometimes it may fit beautifully. Sometimes it may get you to think outside the box, to think in new ways of how this kind of decision making and these pieces put together could create a new type of lesson. But sometimes it's just not going to work. For example, if my content area was getting students to describe the elements of a 5 paragraph essay, and my pedagogical approach was think, pair, share. If I spin the technology spinner and I land on a TS-84 calculator, obviously that's not going to fit. And so then what do? Well, this is a very low stakes activity. I can just spin again and see what I get. Now, this whole activity is to get your colleagues and you thinking about these different pieces and how they fit together to create an engaging lesson. But also, it is giving us permission to spin and try and choose again. This is naturally what we're doing when we're making decisions about the lesson plans that we're creating. We're logically thinking of all of these elements, but I've just broken them out really specifically into this activity. So the more you think about these elements, the more you can consider how they all fit together based on your knowledge. So your knowledge base, you're going to be comfortable in some areas. You could spin any one of these wheel decides content, pedagogy, or technology and not know what it has landed on. It's not something that's familiar to you, or it may be very familiar to you. But the goal is to think about and decide, what do you know? What do you want to use? And what's going to be best for the context of the learning in that given lesson, for that given class? So remember that fourth circle? It is very important. And it's often not discussed when people discuss the TPAC framework. So the context of the learning that's happening in that day is just as important as the decisions and the knowledge that you have for your curriculum design. It could be the very beginning of a lesson, and you're going to make some certain choices to onboard your students and get them acclimated to a content area. You may make pedagogical decisions based on where you are in a unit of that lesson. And you may make technology choices based on the skills and abilities of the learners that you're supporting. The context is a very important piece of this element. So you might be wondering, Jackie, what are you talking about? Why all of these pieces? How is this all connected? And I love this framework because it is a simple idea that is reinforcing that just because we might have an expert in the room, you might be so good at your subject area, doesn't necessarily mean that you might have all of the great teacher practices, or you might lack some pedagogical knowledge, or you might have some really strong pedagogical strategies, but they're your go-tos and they're kind of what you're always doing, and your students may lose engagement. That also applies with technology. So when we consider, for example, like blended learning, fostering that learning for both inside and outside the classroom and encompassing different learning activities, hands-on activities, instructional types, this framework helps us think through and make decisions of what we do, why we do it, and also why not do it. So we have to combine our knowledge with the subject and how we want to teach it. And we need to learn how to combine the technology to that content and pedagogy to create that really effective and engaging learning environment. Now, I talk about this model a lot with educators, and the goal too is not to focus necessarily just on technology and supports, but again, that pedagogical practice. I remember going out into a field in middle school and learning about science food web and having a ball of yarn. And I was a worm and I threw the ball of yarn to somebody else and they were a bird and they threw the ball of yarn and then they were a fox. And so we're literally creating a food web. And that visual and hands-on learning experience was very valuable. I wouldn't replace that just because I could have a technology tool to do it. But now I could use my TPAC framework to think through how do I incorporate that hands-on activity and creating not only the content and the pedagogy that I need, but then perhaps my class goes back to the classroom and writes about it with a technology tool to blog or take pictures and expand upon that hands-on learning experience. So to dig in here a little bit step further is that this is also great if you are a classroom teacher to use for self-assessment. So oftentimes I use this model with leadership and coaches to get them thinking about how teachers design their lessons. But if you're a teacher, you can use this framework to self-assess. So I like to consider that our knowledge is going to be larger in some areas, maybe smaller than others. For some lessons I've seen where content is very strong and the pedagogical practice is in alignment and they overlap, but maybe the technology is being used purposely outside of those two, but their circle's a little smaller because they're still learning. Sometimes the technology is going to support the pedagogical approach, maybe not necessarily content, and that's fine. That is an approach. So it's a way of thinking about how are these all in alignment. And I have seen lessons where the technology is ruling that particular lesson, and that is what everyone is focusing on. The content is still there, and maybe the pedagogical practice is a little removed from it. So this is a great way to kind of think about how much do I know about this? What size is the circle? And I invite educators to use a simple tool. In this case, I have a whiteboard tool where go ahead and map your TPAC for this lesson. What does it look like for you? And everybody's circles are different, even if we're talking about the same lesson. And it's a great way for me to as a coach to come out and support others. But it's a great way for the teachers to think about what their knowledge strengths are and where they could maybe use some supports, or is their lesson really in alignment? Are they focusing all on technology and the content's kind of removed over to the side? Well, we need to bring that content back in. And maybe the pedagogical approaches, that circle's small. So we need to maybe advocate for more strategies or more pedagogical approaches that could better align and fit with what we want to do and how we want to do it in a class. So to kind of round up some of this TPAC conversation, this can be used in many different ways. It helps us to create a common language with those that we work with to kind of evaluate or select technology and really support and enhance that learning. It imposes a really thoughtful lens when you're observing other teachers teach, whether you're a principal, a coach, or even just a teacher who wants to see how other teachers are teaching, which is an excellent practice. I highly recommend peer-to-peer observation. It gives you this really thoughtful lens when observing technology-infused instruction, and it helps you engage also, again, in that self-assessment of your TPAC. And I love it when a principal will come to me and say, I was observing a lesson and I wanted to know why the teacher wasn't using technology. And the teacher will say, well, let me pull up my TPAC circles. I'm going to tell you why. The technology did not support the content and the pedagogy, and this was their sound decision making, and they used this framework to support it. And it was just fantastic. Or they wanted to know did you choose that technology? And again, they could pull out this framework and they could say, this was my thinking, this was the thought process, and this helped me make the decision that I made. And so it's so wonderful when I could see it. They're all speaking the same language and they all kind of understand this in context. And again, we simplified the model at the Friday Institute. We took out all the arrows and the lines because we really want you to focus on what is your knowledge base and how are they all connected to support the decision-making process that you're doing every day as an educator designing lessons. So take a moment. You have the Q&A available to you. I would love to know, what's coming up for you, what's got you thinking, and is anything sparking for you, anything you've learned, or of course, is there any pushback? Feel free to add that in the Q&A. So, along with all this technology integration, and when we're talking about digital learning, I want to take a moment to address ed tech choices because it really does need to be aligned to learning goals. And we say that all the time, but like, how can we make this a simple process? So I came across this research that said K-12 students were using 74 different digital learning tools during the first half of their school year, and educators were using 86 different ed tech apps and software systems in that same time. Hopefully something's sparking with you with this research. What has it got you thinking? So on one hand, wow, there's just so many resources and tools available to us. Um, I've been along round enough, long enough to know and remember when the textbook was really my one core source of content and my teaching aid. But on the other hand, we can also say, wow, that's a lot of tools. Is the emphasis on tools and stuff, or is it the learning goals and the content we want to teach? So, what do the learning goals really require? So, consider for a moment if you've got something to write with, you might want to grab a little note and jot down what are some of those ed tech tools that you've been using to support your work or your curriculum instruction for the last 6 months. If you're not a classroom teacher, you can consider tools that you use on a regular basis. What does that core list of tools look like? And those go-to tools that you use on a regular basis. It may be a pretty long list. So I have found this resource, and your terminology may differ. It could be objectives, standards, or learning essentials. But no matter what you call it, the digital tools or resources chosen, we know we want them to align to our clear and rigorous goals for instruction. And you could see here 4 categories of learning goals: knowledge, reasoning, real-time demonstration, and then a product. So this is just a really kind of large categories or things that we know happen during instruction and when we have a learning goal, what we want our learners to do. And you can see over to the all the way to the left is like really simplified: learn it, practice it, and then what is the evidence of that learning? So I have worked with educators to take their tool lists. For example, you could see this here, and then align those tools that they're always using to these learning categories, learning goal categories. So if some of these are going to hit across the board for knowledge, reasoning, real time, developing a product, what does it look like? But then some tools that we have looked at and talked about on their lists don't hit any of those. So then we have to decide, is this a tool worth keeping in my curriculum and instruction? It could be a tool that is just super helpful for efficiency on your part as the educator. Keep those. But, when we look at the tools that we're always using, what are the examples of how are they connected to our learning goals? It is something that is really simple, but we can often sometimes forget that this is really the essential piece. So after educators make their list, make a list of all the tools that you're using. Let's work to collaboratively as a table and think about where do they fit in these 4 categories. And then is there anything that you want to elevate? Is there any tools that you need to like maybe set aside for a little while? So it's a great conversation to really dig into the practicalities of the tools that we're using and why we're using them. Also, of course, additional considerations of this is these 3 elements: personalization, authenticity, and collaboration. Tools that help us do these things with our learners in our learning environment are essential and very helpful. So I wanted to highlight those as well. So I take that little ed tech break to, again, keep us thinking about why are we choosing what we're choosing? Is it connected? And of course, it perfectly aligns with that TPAC model we just talked about. What do you want learners to learn? What do you want your learners to experience in their learning? And can the digital tool or resource that we're considering deepen or make the process more efficient for that particular lesson or learning experience? All right. So again, a familiar framework for some of you, I imagine, the SAMR model, substitution, augmentation, modification, redefinition model for technology integration. Now, if you're familiar with this one, stay tuned. I've got a little bit of extra for you when it comes to this model, and making sure that I can share my sound here. And so if you Google SAMR, you're going to find something like this. This is a model that helps us consider the rigor, if you will, of the technology that's being used by the learner. So substitution being the easiest. Substitution acts is this. So direct substitute. I can ask my students to grab a pen and paper, or I can ask them to jump on a Google document and write. Really asking them to do the same thing, but with just two different, very different tools. Augmentation is where there's a technology substitute, but no real functional improvement. So for example, if I want students to peer review with what they wrote on that Google document, they can turn and talk, or we can use the comment feature in Google Documents where students can give feedback, and that is a functional improvement. Modification is where the technology allows for a significant task redefine, where I'm able to do something in the classroom that has upped the ante, right? Where students are able to be more efficient in their use or be able to create for that evidence of their learning. And finally, redefinition is where the technology is allowing me to do something that I could not conceivably do in the classroom without that tech. So I'm going to dig in a little bit deeper here. And if you are familiar with this model, you may be familiar with the SAMR swimming pool. And I'm going to play this very short clip that I have created as a way to think about the SAMR model with one small redefinition.
Imagine the SAMR model is a swimming pool. We have the enhancement shallow end and the transformative deep end. Across these technology waters are the four levels of the SAMR model. Substitution, where technology acts as a direct substitute with no functional change to the learning experience. Augmentation, when the technology acts as a direct tool substitute but with some functional improvements to the learning experience. Modification, where technology allows for significant task redesign within the learning experience. And redefinition, when technology allows for the creation of new tasks within the learning experience previously unimaginable. In the original SAMR model, there is a line separating substitution and augmentation from this modification redefinition goal, a line dividing educational enhancement from educational transformation. The message given is that educators must teach above the line with a focus on modification and redefinition. However, the realities of teaching and learning with digital tools and resources are not sustainable if you continue to tread water in the deep end. We would exhaust ourselves and sink. Therefore, it is suggested that you remove the line. Just as educators work across the levels of Bloom's taxonomy, the levels of the SAMR model must also be flexible and aligned to what students are doing in a classroom. Only teaching at the level of evaluate and create is impossible and ineffective, just as only integrating technology at the modification redefinition levels are unrealistic. Our goal now is to swim laps, but that is not all this metaphor helps us to see. Imagine too the myriad of educators swimming in these technology waters. Some may be doing cannonballs in the deep end. while some would rather stay in the shallow end. And others may need help even putting their toe in the technology waters. For these educators, special flotation supports, represented by professional development, coaching, and professional and personal learning networks, to name a few, are needed to help them begin to swim. But no matter where you swim in the pool, everyone can use supports and guidance working across the SAMR model to support student-centered learning, just as educators teach across Bloom's taxonomy to support students' skills and abilities. So erase the line and swim laps across the SAMR model.
All right, so I'm curious. I know I made that a while ago, but I still think it no pun intended, holds water, right? Like there is just this idea of when I share the SAMR model, they're like, oh, I gotta teach above that line. I gotta be modifying and redefining, and I have to be transformative. And reality is that's not sustainable. And some days substitution is exactly what you need for the instruction because it's about the learners. And I love um, talking about SAMR in the metaphor of a swimming pool because we naturally do this with Bloom's. We're going up and down Bloom's taxonomy based on what the lessons are going to require, what our learners are going to need. And the SAMR model is no different when we consider and just think about the rigor and use of the technology. And again, if you want to take the lens of the SAMR model also for your students, if they're experiencing lessons that are always redefining and oh, they they may need to have a check. Like, how are they doing? Are they really getting that learning goal, or they're just having all these really interesting hands-on experiences, but is the content sinking in? So, and you'll notice the metaphor of flotation devices. If you're instructional coaches, we need to cover our educators and floaties. What supports do they need? So if you're seeing an educator who is just regularly substituting on a regular basis, that's a great opportunity to talk to them and maybe build some of their skills and supports where they could swim a little further out into that augmentation and modification waters. And if likewise, you're seeing an educator, a colleague who is regularly redefining and modifying and they're swimming in that deep end on a regular basis, you can congratulate them and then like check in on them. How are they doing? Because our research is showing that if educators are always feeling that that's the expectation, they burn out very quickly. So to help navigate what this model is, I love this SAMR flowchart. If you've got our slides, can click on that flowchart for a closer look. You can also find the link here in the chat. And I'm always asked, well, how do I know where in SAMR am I or which one am I at? I'm like, it's really a spectrum, and having to pinpoint exactly where you are, it may not be necessary, but if it's important for you to know where you land, this can be really helpful. And I want to highlight that non-use of technology is an option. Going back to our TPAC framework and making that decision of saying, is technology going to be purposeful to help with my content and get my learners pedagogically to go through the process of how I want them to learn it? And if technology is not going to support it or enhance the efficiency of it, then maybe I choose not to use it. So that is an option with the SAMR model as well. So in your mind flowchart, you can see, is technology being used in this instructional activity? Yes or no? If yes, could the instructional activity be done without the technology? If yes, substitution. If yeah, kind of partially, that's augmentation. If the answer is no, then perhaps you're closer to the modification or redefinition levels of SAMR. Has the instructional activity been designed such that the technology brings transformational learning opportunities? Partially, modification. Definitely yes, redefinition. Or, no, I don't think so. Well, now we're back to augmentation. Super simple flowchart. I love sharing this with administrators who have heard of this model, but they don't quite understand it. And when they go into a classroom and they want to understand how the technology could be integrated and used, this is helpful. But I want to state that both the TPAC model and the SAMR framework are not evaluative tools. They should not be used to evaluate any teacher's lessons or their skills and abilities. These are tools to self-assess and think about, How are you using technology, and how are you designing for the technology? So, really briefly, because I'm always asked, like, how do you know what this looks like when you're looking at it? So, I have a case study here. If you've got the slides, you can read the case study. I'm not going to read it to you. Why would I do that? Death by PowerPoint, right? So, in this example, as the teacher I worked with, Miss Patterson, high school biology teacher, struggled to keep her students grasping the concept of cellular processes. Like osmosis and photosynthesis with her kind of traditional lectures and her textbook diagrams and her worksheets. And so engagement was low, and students had difficulty kind of visualizing these concepts. So after learning about SAMR, she incorporated interactive simulations from the PHET website into her lessons. And these allowed her students to manipulate the variables to observe the effects of the cellular process in real time. You can't do that without the technology, right? So as a result, students demonstrated that deeper understanding. There were more participation was happening in the classroom, and the students just enjoyed it so much more. So this example of kind of augmentation and modification. This not only informed Miss Patterson's teaching, but it enhanced both that student engagement and their comprehension. And if you wanted to take a look at like what does redefinition look like, this is an example. I worked with an educator, Mr. Morales. He's a middle school social studies teacher, and he wanted to deepen the engagement in his history class on unit on ancient civilizations. So his students previously they were kind of creating these poster presentations, but this really limited the collaboration. They were using kind of modern tools, but once he applied the SAMR model, this helped him to kind of rethink the project and redefine using Google Documents, Padlet, and Google Earth. So students collaborated in real time to create the timelines, interactive maps. They added multimedia elements to what they were creating. They recorded video presentations via Flipgrid to explain their findings. And overall became a much richer experience. Students worked together more efficiently. Even from home, they were collaborating, and it was enhancing their research and their creativity along with that essential critical thinking. So, by integrating that technology, Mr. Morales redefined that project and was really focusing on fostering that collaboration and that critical thinking. And of course, the digital skills that go along with this learning experience for his students that they can take beyond the classroom. So again, if you've got any thoughts, questions, or pushback, let me know what's coming up for you, what's sparking. I'd love that feedback in either the Q&A or the chat. So as we're kind of wrapping up our time together, interesting enough, and I picked these two frameworks for a reason, because I am often approached when I'm at conferences or I'm talking to educators, and they'll be like, you know what? I really like one, but I'm not a fan of the other. And I always found that really funny because to me, these are completely separate frameworks that can be combined to really support educators. And but oftentimes educators see this is either one or the other. They're going to pick one that they like and then they're going to abandon the other one. So I just want to take a moment to do a quick comparison before our time is up today. So TPAC ensures that technology supports our pedagogical goals and content knowledge, emphasizing that balance between our teaching methods, the subject matter, and the technology tools. But SAMR evaluates how deeply the technology is embedded in our lesson, from simple substitution to task redefinition. So together, they're providing this complete picture. SAMR shows how far you've integrated technology, and TPAC ensures that it's been done in a way that enhances teaching and learning. So I think they complement each other. So SAMR can be used to evaluate the extent of the technology integration. And when I say evaluate, I mean self-assess, right? As an educator, am I balancing how I'm using technology across that model? And TPAC helps ensure the integration is pedagogically sound. And your technology coaches will love it when you start talking this way because they'll go, "Oh, you get it. It's amazing." And likewise, they share this common goal, both of these frameworks, for enhancing digital learning. And they're going to emphasize the importance of aligning that technology. We know content is king. Content really doesn't change. However, in the TPAC model, it's our knowledge of that content that's going to be larger or smaller. And then our pedagogical approaches. How many strategies do you really use in the classroom on a regular basis? Is it like 4 or 5 that you kind of regularly rotate? Like I love think, pair, share and turn in talks and things like that, or how can you stretch that a little bit and add some new pedagogical practices into the mix? And of course, that thoughtful technology integration is key. If it's purposeful, great. Integrate it, use it. If it's not going to enhance and transform that learning, maybe the technology isn't needed for that particular element of your lesson. So I have one more case study to kind of highlight this combination for you because I'm always asked for examples. And this is an example with Missy, an elementary math teacher. She wanted to help her students improve their problem solving skills, particularly when applying fractions in real life contexts. So traditionally, she would kind of lecture, she'd give them worksheets, but they really struggled to connect. The students struggled to connect with the material and the practical solutions. So she reimagined her lesson using technology and incorporating a math app called Fraction Quest. And this gamified fraction problems using real world scenarios like dividing pizzas, I remember. And she also used this interactive whiteboard to facilitate the class discussions where students can explain their reasoning and their engagement and do some peer teaching. And so through she actually moved through all of the SAMR levels, which doesn't often happen, but there was a great example of seeing it in real life. And she replaced the worksheets with that whiteboard app. She added value through that immediate feedback. She redefined her lessons by having her students solve these complex real world problems in a game based environment. So, this combination of technology and pedagogy really supported the TPAC framework and transformed the learning experience. So, she saw a significant improvement in the students' abilities to solve these problems. And overall, the student feedback was they really loved the kind of game based experience that they had. So again, yeah, this is a great example of that art of teaching with the science of learning kind of approach. She was able to engage her students in a much more deeper and more meaningful way to perform to improve those learning outcomes. And I give you these case studies on these slides because if you are working with other educators, you can use these examples. You can ask them to highlight certain parts or what are they identifying. Take out my bold results or key takeaways, or you can modify these and ask educators where are they seeing in the lesson examples that could align to these frameworks? And do they have any similar experiences or desire to have similar experiences in their classroom? So these two frameworks, it's a great combination, I believe. As an instructional coach, I've been an instructional coach for over 15 years with the Friday Institute, able to help and support educators across North Carolina and beyond. And these are foundational frameworks that I always go back to in my conversations. And whether they are new to you or kind of like, gosh, these dust these off. These are still pretty relevant and helpful. So again, it's all about the context of the learning in a given moment. It's changing, it's shifting. What I teach in my first period class may be a little bit different in my third period class because those students are different. As an educator, you make those decisions every day, but these frameworks can help have a common vocabulary, have a common language, and that kind of collaborative conversations that you can have with your instructional coaches and your peer teachers and your administration about what this looks like for practical digital teaching and learning in your learning environments. So, of course, let me know what's coming up for you. What are you thinking of? And do you have any pushback? Because that is part of this conversation, too. There's lots of frameworks and materials out there. So These are just two, but these are two that I'm constantly coming back to in my work and my conversations with educators. So I hope that this has been helpful. We are at time, but if you have any questions at all, please let me know. You have my information, as well as if you get a chance, I would absolutely love, because this is how I learn and grow, feedback from you. I'm adding the link in the chat. Please let me know, what have you learned? What are you taking away? What is helpful and what could be helpful? Because we at the Friday Institute are always learning and growing and trying to support and help you where you are. So thank you for your time today. I hope this has been helpful. Oh, thank you, Allison. You're very sweet to say so. And again, if anybody has any questions, you have my contact information. Feel free to reach out at any time.